Hello, everyone. Glad you could make it to our advertising rescue workshop. We put this workshop together because advertising has become the main lever for growth. So, like it or not, you're going to have to pay to play. Organic reach is drying up, email open rates are sliding, even your best content often doesn't get the attention it deserves. That means if you're going to invest in paid ads, especially on LinkedIn, you got to get a lot sharper with your messaging and your targeting. So this workshop is actually about helping you do just that, cutting out the waste, getting to the message that actually drives clicks, leads, and pipeline, most importantly, sales conversations. So we really appreciate everybody that sent in their LinkedIn ads ahead of time. It takes guts to put your stuff out there, and it's going to make the session better for all of us. But we'll use those examples to dig into what's working, what's not, and how to fix it. But before we jump in, let's go around our experts here and introduce themselves. Let's start with James.
Hi everyone, I'm James, marketing consultant with ALG for, I don't know, getting on 20 years now. Previously worked with Forrester Research and have worked on a whole load of different B2B software accounts from small startups to large enterprises. So a pretty broad range of experience, hopefully, to bring to the table here.
Great. And
Yeah,
Rachel?
definitely. Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm the digital marketing manager here at ALG. I spend a lot of my time with Jason looking at messaging and copywriting. So happy to dig in and get things going here.
And I'm Jason Myers. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Austin Lawrence Group. And like Rachel said, I spent a long time looking at advertisements and reading everything I can get my hands on in terms of proper positioning and messaging so that we can hand that over to you and help you figure out what's going to work the best. So let's jump in. So first is Mission Cloud.
Yes, and Courtney is on the call, it looks like. So if
Oh,
you're
great.
comfortable with joining us, we'd love to welcome you in so you can give us a little bit of context. Hello.
Yeah, so these ads that I shared in, these are our top most performing ads, and they stay running almost all year. But so as our concerns are listed, low click-through rate, not enough conversions, there is a mix of messaging and user experience. So right now the ads are not being directed to their specific landing pages. They're just going to the general homepage. So we are just wanting to find a way that we can have customers just be more engaging with our ads. Like, what can bring somebody from LinkedIn to our homepage and actually press the get in touch button and convert them, to our sales team.
Great. And are you targeting these ads like specifically to contacts that you're working throughout your CRM, or is it more like a broad audience targeting on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so we try to go to manager and above in the IT sector of the job board. We typically try not to target C levels, depending on the size of the company, but I would say, yeah, between manager, director, and VP.
Okay, very good. And then, so it says here your click-through rates have been somewhat low. You think then that's based on your experience with other ads in the past, or just in terms of industry benchmarks, or where are you coming up with that that's a low click-through rate?
Just kind of with our other ads and how it's performing.
Got it. Okay. Well, just to kind of kick it off here, I think your messaging is probably a little bit vague here. So when you say level up your cloud ops, I'm not sure that that has like a lot of stopping power in the scroll. And you have to realize that LinkedIn, first of all, LinkedIn is not an intent channel. So we're not really going in there looking for solutions. So anything that tends to be more direct response oriented is going to get potentially passed by unless you're, addressing a problem that the prospect knows that they have to solve like right now. So it's really when you're using ads like that to kind of get leads in the who might be entering a buying window, you really have to speak to those problems more directly. So when I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, so what is it about cloud ops that's causing your prospects issues in terms of making progress where they want to make progress. That's really the key. If you don't know the answer to that, then you need to go ask them.
Hmm.
But you need to understand really what it is that where are your prospects struggling to make progress? So much that without your system, that future state that they want is going to be either impossible or very, very difficult to achieve. That's what you want to get out in your main messaging to really stop that scroll.
Okay.
James?
Yeah, I wanted to just pick up on a couple of things you said. So the number one piece of advice that we always have is around problem agreement and how that is expressed. A clear idea about a problem that is crisply written is the best way to catch buyers' attention. And Jason, you talked about LinkedIn not being an intent channel. I think it's just worth mentioning what that means. If you're going on to LinkedIn, you're typically looking to engage with your peers, or you're looking for what's going on in your industry, maybe for jobs or hiring. You're not going on there to buy software and looking about changes and trends in your industry. So that messaging has to work even harder because somebody's going to take a mind shift out of the thing that they came for, and it catches them and go, that's the problem that I have. And
Hmm.
that's all the ad has to do. It's just that one thing is kind of go, yeah, I see that, I identify with that single thing, and now I'm ready to click. And then that takes us to the kind of we put sort of 3 bullet points and the recommendations, but going to go to the third one here, the landing page. The landing page can then, once you've got them on that problem agreement, they've identified with that problem, then you can go and start to tell the rest of your narrative. They've then selected for that particular problem, and you can start to build on that story. So you actually have pretty clean ads. I think that's one of the things that I think is good about what you've got going on, that they're not too busy, they're not got too many messages going on, which is a common problem. But what as Jason said, I think where we could improve is that really crisp problem agreement.
Yeah. No, totally agree. And like you said, kind of getting a user off of a traditionally job searching platform
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
go and seek software opportunity or solution opportunities.
Yeah, you're gonna have to hit them square between the eyes with an issue. And also just to add on to what James just said there, I know you said you're leading them to the homepage on your website. You know, I would try to avoid that.
Yeah, that was when we were like searching for these ads, that's actually when we recognized that they weren't even going to the specific solution landing page. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's something that we are going to be actively adjusting anyways.
And the reason I bring it up is because you'll hear us talking about the formula for positioning and messaging. And we've co-opted this a lot from the challenger sale kind of narrative, which is where we come up with the problem agreement. So you want to get agreement on a problem in the ad. And then on the landing page, you can then point out the deficiencies or inadequacies of the current processes or technologies. So in other words, hey, there's a big problem out there. Typically people try to solve it by doing XYZ. It doesn't work that well. And then you can provide your reframe. That's how we're doing it differently. If you're using AI, that's the place to introduce it. But that's basically the formula. And of course, you can't do all that in an ad. But what you can do on the ad is just attract the people that agree that it's a problem.
Mhm.
And then in terms of like testing, you would want to test different pain points across the gamut. Rachel,
Awesome.
what are your thoughts?
I mean, you guys kind of spoke on most of it, which is totally fine. But yeah, especially when we talk about this problem agreement, the way that I like to think of it really is what is that pain that they're feeling when they don't use your solution? Because they might not even know that it's a problem that they have. They might not feel, okay, this is a problem or maybe they know it's a kind of a little bit of a problem, but it's not a big enough one that's going to push them to make an action to change. And so if you can find that pain that is really hurting and convince them that they're really hurting, and that can grab their attention, and then yeah, on the landing page you kind of talk to them through the whole thing that Jason went through with the reframe and the problems with doing it the current way you're doing it and how we can fix that for you. And I also want to point out that James did mention that the creative itself is a clean and good look, which I agree. A lot of times we see ads that come in that are just very busy. They have a lot of text on the creative. They're trying to do a lot. So you're in the right direction there with staying focused on a single message sort of idea. It's just maybe not the best message that you can be putting out there.
Gotcha. No, greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course.
And one thing I'll add to that too is that a lot of times you'll see on LinkedIn people pushing content too. But the idea doesn't change, right? It's just the CTA is, get this piece of content, but you still have to use that same formula in the content if you want anybody to read it. In other words, if I don't knock them over the head with a problem, so it's not your ultimate guide to cloud operations. It's, what you're missing if you don't have our system with cloud operations, essentially what you're
Yeah.
saying, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
Addressing the problem kind of head on in the message at first.
Yep. And I'm telling you, you wrap in problem agreement into your ads, you're ahead of 80% of software companies. They just don't do it.
Yeah.
So here's another one. Let's look at this one. Kind of similar click-through rate looks like.
Yeah, the click-through rate was for, I think, all three of these, right?
Yeah, it was kind of like the average.
Okay.
Okay. So this one's closer, but let's talk about like what does more clarity mean? So the way that I want to think about this is like because you don't have clarity now, what problems is that causing in your organization? So much so that it has to be fixed.
Is that a question to me?
Yeah, it,
Something
it
to
can
think
be
about.
it can be, it
Yeah.
can be
No.
hypothetical if you don't know the answer. If you don't know the answer, then you got to do some research with your clients and why they bought from you. But that's the gist of it. If you can really figure out, because they don't have clarity today, what problems does that cause? Are we missing deadlines? Are
Yeah.
we having to stay up late on Fridays to try to fix stuff? I don't know what it is, but it's like some downstream impact from not having the clarity. That's what we want to focus on.
Okay. I know we have like cloud, like cost optimization case studies in that there's like metrics, like, oh, X customer saved, you know, 400K in a year over year, in their cloud cost. And that,
Okay, there you go. So not having clarity is equaling a big number of wasted spend,
hmm
right?
yeah.
Something I know we're going to be kind of going to talk about is sort of variation in messaging and the ability to test on that using digital channels. So the thing with problem agreement is, well, what problem, right? There's a number of problems that you solve. So what's the one that your buyer is concerned about right now? And also, how do they think about it? And that's difficult to know. So having an idea of a set of the problems that they might be experiencing is kind of the first step, and creating different variations on the ad, based on those sort of factual problems. But I also, another variation on messaging which is worth trying is the tone of how that problem is expressed. And so I think in B2B marketing, we tend to think, very business-like messages, and that can be fine, that can be correct. But it's also true that in any field, people buy emotionally and then justify rationally. And so if you think of sort of consumer style marketing, how they talk about a problem there, I was thinking like washing powder commercials are kind of a good one. How to deal with certain kinds of stains, right? Very factual. This deals very well with a grass stain, okay? Or there might be something more emotional where you see an ad where kids are lined up for a soccer match and it's your kid's got the dull white and all the other ones are in brilliant. So there's an emotional dimension to the performance of that washing powder to deliver white. And so there's technical things we can deliver for people, there's financial outcomes, but there's also how they feel about it. And so in a B2B context, how is that affecting their relationship with colleagues, their desire to want to grow in their job, these sorts of things, having their time wasted, all the sort of frustrations. And I'm not saying that those messages are necessarily better, but they're ones that you might want to try out alongside the more kind of on the nose business outcomes and see what gets people clicking. And that's the beauty of digital advertising, is you can create a whole load of variations of a theme and LinkedIn will run them, and you'll get data on the highest performers. And that's what then you can start to really have that impact on your click-through rate and conversions.
No, yeah, that all makes sense. And I like your point on how to, like, comparing it to the B2C and making it a little bit more of an emotional experience. I think that makes a lot of sense, when it's coming into like the IT decision maker of the company, to try to make it more relatable and personal in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, in B2B, we talk about pain, right? We're just calling it problems, right? Problem agreement, but there's some kind of pain, and that's driving, our need to buy something, right? But if people don't believe that it's a problem that's worth solving right now, they're going to blow right past it. So you've got to build some kind of urgency, especially when there's a problem awareness component. So, for example, in your case, you may be wasting a ton of money that you didn't know about, and you need to take a look at this right now, is kind of the gist of the message that we want to get across.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I touched on that a tiny bit before, but yeah, thank you, Jason, for naming it. The problem awareness is, yeah, what I was going for. But I just want to touch on what James said about the variation in the testing. Sometimes it can be expensive if you're testing all of these different messages with paid ads. So from Day Trading Attention, Gary Vee, we like referring to that book. It's a good resource, but he mentions testing organically and seeing what messages resonate there. And then that's how you know you can put money behind, this is the ad that's resonating with my audience. So Jason, I don't know if you have like a comment on how well that might work on LinkedIn, for instance, but
it
just
works,
something
it
to
works
consider.
fairly well. Like if you just try to put out LinkedIn posts, right? They're fairly easy to create. You can even use Chat GPT to help you with a lot of it, but you probably want some sort of graphic or video interview or something like that. But it's just your opportunity to kind of put out there almost daily for free different
Mhm.
messages and see if anything takes off. Like, do people start talking about it? Do they start sharing it? That kind of stuff. And then when you hit on something like that, then we're safe to assume that we can probably put some money behind that and build some creative off of it. But it's just a really good opportunity to test, especially if you have large followings.
Yeah. And quick question, just like, with the visual of this ad, traditionally, like we would have a button into it. So this ad, for example, does not, and like the hierarchy, the logo's at the bottom, like, is there any advice in terms of like the hierarchy of a visual ad? Like, do buttons for a LinkedIn ad really do things like in the graphic itself?
So it's kind of tough to answer. The short answer is yes, it definitely plays a role. But again, if you're not attracting people that agree with the problem, it
Mhm.
doesn't really matter.
Doesn't really matter. Yeah.
But yes, you want some compelling CTAs. In any kind of advertising, there's really three components to it that you have to get right. Targeting, obviously, the message, which is actually less so. Like you can get by with mediocre messaging if you get the other two right. The other two are targeting and your offer. So, what is the offer? That can be a white paper, that can be, like here you're pushing for expert insights, so some type of assessment. So, I would build out a landing page about that offer to do an assessment and push people toward that and test that messaging. And then the messaging, so it's about 40, 40, 20, like the
Okay.
messaging being 20% of it. But it's still important.
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
pays attention, nobody's going to read it.
And
Right.
yeah, as for the visual with the question on the button, I personally haven't noticed that it's entirely necessary unless it's like Jason is saying, it's a good way to get that clear CTA. In the first ad that we saw, there was that get in touch button. But it's more so that you have a clean ad, you have your logo. Not all of the text is the same size. You've got the important stuff bigger with the follow-up message a little smaller underneath, and that's all the correct way to go about it. So my concern here isn't the visual, and it wasn't the visual. So I think that,
Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't say that's an issue with the way that you've been doing it. It's really, like Jason is saying,
Messaging and context. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, it's a second order level of testing to do. Like the first thing is like getting those problems out there and seeing how people react to that. and changing some of the language and how you describe that problem. Then once you're solid on things like that further down the line, you can start to test out different visuals. And one of the things I we see is when you start having photography in people's faces in ads, that seems to have an effect and things like that. Even when it's really got nothing to do with what's going on, people are attracted to things with other people. But so if you haven't got the first step right, then so the targeting first and then a clear message, things like tweaks in design are very much a secondary effect.
Gotcha. No, yeah, all makes sense.
Let's see, anything different with this one?
Well, I think this one had the sharpest problem agreement. There's in this one, AWS migration, that being problematic and making it easy. This was, I think, in terms of copy, I thought the best.
Yeah, but you're still kind of you're going in the right direction, but you're still missing the big piece, right? Like, so what I mean by that is missions experts make AWS migration easy. So I can assume that the problem agreement is that the migration today is hard, right?
Hmm.
That's what you're basically saying in this ad. But what I'd like is a stronger headline that talks about why it's hard, that alludes to the fact that it's going to continue to be hard until you take our demo, until
Gotcha.
you hire us, right? Like what you're doing is going to continue to suck until you hire us. That's what we want to come out of this ad headline.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's definitely closer to where we're trying to go.
Okay, I think that's it for that. Any last questions for us on those?
No, I really appreciate the time and the advice. I'm definitely going to take it back to the team and hopefully you'll see the ads online.
Excellent. Yeah, we'd
Awesome.
love to do that.
Thanks, Courtney. It's not easy to put yourself out there for this kind of criticism, so we really value you doing it.
Of course. Thank you guys.
Thanks.
All right. So first thing I see here, we like the fact that they're testing variations, kind of like what Rachel talked about before. It just seems to me there's a lot going on in these ads for me personally, and I think we've got to kind of hone in on something. This is another pet peeve of mine, like guides or ultimate guides were over about 5 years ago. And there's really no problem agreement when you say it's your guide to AI analytics for life sciences. So, yes, you're being descriptive of what it is, but you're not giving me a reason to care. And that's going to lose some people in the scroll. It's not going to stop them. So, again, back to our previous conversation, if you're not getting problem agreement in the ad in some way, then they're going to lose them. And that also applies to your blog headlines, to your white paper headlines, and to the homepage on your website and all that kind of stuff. Now, all those have limitations and pros and cons, right? But in ads, we have the opportunity to test singular different pain points, and that's what we should be doing in those ads. So in this case, they're testing, I think, the wrong thing. So they're changing only the copy at the top, but it assumes that people are going to read that copy, and I don't think that's a proper assumption given this headline. James?
Totally agree. So you've got, yeah, here's some variation going on, but can you spot it? It's really hard to tell. And it's that the language with the ad, the sponsored post, as it were, above the visual. Of course, we all look at the visual. So I think it's where the real value in testing and variation goes on is in the visual. And then regards the visual itself here, again, we've seen worse cases, but it's a bit busy. There's a kind of a lot going on, especially with the kind of like the bullet points, and there's kind of a repetition of this, with the cover of the guide and then the headline about the guide. We're kind of saying the same thing twice here. I think just design wise, this could be cleaned up a fair amount. And so bring that testing into the visual.
Now that I say that too, I notice now this reduced time to insight in pharma, that's actually closer to what we're looking for. I didn't see that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why didn't I see it? Right.
They're
Yeah.
very
Right. So put something like that, right, as the big font that
Yeah, that's your big
created.
headline right there.
Right.
You're missing it. Yeah.
Yeah, like James is saying with the testing on variations, just to dig a little bit deeper into that, it really comments on what both of you have said already. Like the image is great It's perfect. We know it's good. We don't need changes to it. It's speaking to the problem and the pain point, and it's doing well. Maybe we want to just do a little bit better now. That's when maybe you can go and test the different ad copy at, in the call to action there or in that body copy at the top. But if we haven't nailed what the problem is and we haven't nailed the creative here, like Jason is saying, are people actually going to stop and look at this and then read that copy up there? Probably not. It's not grabbing their attention. You need it to like grab their shirt and say, this is the problem you're having. You're feeling this pain. Read the guide, get the guide. It will help you. So right now it's not quite doing that. And that's the issue that we're trying to solve, basically.
One of the challenges with advertising content, especially content like this, is the content delivers a lot. So this is a guide. It's got, it's intended to have a lot in it. As we can see, there's use cases, success stories, and testimonials. So a good kind of a thing in variation testing to kind of put out there is just to kind of focus on each of those ones perhaps at the same time, so we can have clear problem agreement, but also like, do people want to learn about use cases? Is that the thing that they're struggling to know about? Do they want to hear stories from their peers, success stories? Does a testimonial quote drive the interaction with a recognized competitor in the industry with a comment to say that's about the problem? I turn that into the message, and don't worry about trying to say that this is the guide with all of these things. Just hook them on the thing that, with some variation, they'll find and react to the thing that matters to them. And then the rest of the guide is there. So it's tempting to kind of want to go, look, here's our whole stall, but you've got just a moment scrolling past a stream of someone's attention. And
right.
So it's just too much at once.
Yeah, definitely. Have multiple different ads that, from the library that we saw, there's plenty of ads running. So instead of doing the exact same thing, just with, a different message in the ad copy, give a different focus point for each of them. Like an example of what you can do with the success stories, take a stat like how we had just talked about with Mission, how, this guide saved this person X money, something of the sort like that can speak to people as well. Use that as an example for your headline for an ad. Test that variation.
Before we move on, I also want to bring up a separate point about leading with AI in the headline. There's something called market sophistication that was brought up in a 1966 book by Eugene Schwartz. It's like the Bible for all the direct response marketers, called Breakthrough Advertising. But in there, like in the first couple of chapters, he makes the point that you have to know where the level of sophistication is for your product. And today, AI is table stakes, meaning that if you are leading with AI in your headlines, trying to get problem agreement around AI, you're going to suffer because people expect you to have AI wrapped in at this point. So instead, you have to build it as the reframe. So, in other words, there's a big problem out there. You traditionally try to solve it this way and it doesn't work very well. That's when you introduce the AI. That's how we use AI differently to solve this problem. And then there's the way that you differentiate yourself.
There's just a little story to share just from a call this morning with a client. So I spent a lot of time working in the last decade in AI marketing, and it's hard to differentiate. It's hard to stand out, especially when it's very over marketed. But I think people do have questions about how to get the most out of this technology. And it looks like that's what this guide is trying to do. But it doesn't really tell you, how or why. And I think that's the thing that people are trying to solve. And if you can get to that, you start to show much greater credibility in an area where there's an awful lot of marketing fluff. So everybody's like, shiny new thing. The conversation we're having with the client this morning, who's innovating with AI for their industry, was about the need for data and having your data resources in place to be able to use AI on the analytics. Very sensible thing. AI runs off data. And so, the credibility that they will gain in their messaging by showing that, yes, we have AI, but actually what we do is help you get your organization in such a state that you have the data resources to drive the AI and get value out of it. It's a much more compelling message than we've got AI, So I think in this guide, I would imagine there's some really useful things to learn about how to get AI analytics success in the life sciences.
I suspect in their case, it has something to do with this reducing time to insight, right? And so if that's the big problem, everybody wants to reduce their time to insight, then how are they trying to do that today and it doesn't work? And then that's why we're using AI. There's your formula right there.
Right. And just to comment, all of these conclusions that we've drawn from this about what might be in the guide, most people aren't going to do that because you scroll past, right past, it's 2 seconds scroll. You have to catch everyone's attention in that very short time frame. We've spent way longer than that looking at this to come to that conclusion, even if it was only 30 seconds. But most people aren't going to give that 30 seconds if it doesn't have that stopping power in the first place.
Good point.
Yeah.
Here's some more, and we can see these are just very busy. You got a lot in here. And again, like putting in there is the reason that I want to read this guide because I want use cases and success stories and testimonials. I mean, put yourself in the buyer's shoes. Like, is that going to appeal to you? Or is it that I have to do something right now or my job could be affected? James?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ones on the previous screen were better than these, but they're kind of variations on a theme. They're just harder to look at. It's harder to kind of extract meaning from it because there's just too much going on. And it's like you said, Rachel, that not even, it's a fraction of a second.
Right.
I think what humans are remarkably good and quick at spotting something which matters to them, or a huge field of information. We go into our email inbox in the morning and we scroll through and like delete, 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 and get rid of a whole load of stuff. And there might be a marketing one in there that you kind of pause over because you can very quick from that heading and you see a little bit of copy, you go, that one gets a little bit more of your time. So a good message, timed right, really that fraction of a second can be enough, but you've got to make it easy for people.
That fraction of a second really counts.
I mean, this one's definitely more fun. Like this
Yeah.
It's definitely more visually engaging. Again,
we think the creative here has a lot more stopping power, but
this one has a lot more potential, but they're losing me with the quote in the first one, AI agents with a plan and the ability to follow through. I don't know what that means. Hit me with a big problem there.
Yeah.
And otherwise, this is really good. I like these cartoon ads. This would definitely stop the scroll if it was me. I'd read that. But then I wouldn't read much farther than the first thing there. I'm like, I don't understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, finding ways to stand out is a good thing. Again, that comes after the problem agreement.
So let's talk about some ads we like. This is one of my favorites, actually, from another agency. Very clear problem agreement, right? Like cart abandonment. What do we do about people abandoning stuff in their carts? And then I see the stat right there, cart abandonment down 49% thanks to a new website. So I know exactly what they're doing. I know exactly who it's for, and I know exactly what the problem is, and I see the social proof result right there. So if I had cart abandonment, I would definitely click on this ad.
Yeah.
That's all it has to do, right? If cart abandonment's not your problem, you're just going to scroll on right past. But if that is your problem, if that's something that's affecting you right now, it's pretty likely you're gonna take a moment to pause on this.
And the copy itself, too, outside of the creative, adds value. Everything here is purposeful. Everything here has a reason to be here. It adds value. Yeah, we really like this ad.
Great. Gong does a lot of great stuff. I like this ad because the headline is just so in your face and it's definitely addressing a problem. Our sales engagement is broken or was broken. Very creative approach to problem agreement. And then, of course, in the top, they're doing well and kind of explaining that a little bit further. So 88% of sales leaders are not happy with their engagement tool. Now I'm getting a little more clarity into what this is about. So overall, I like this one a lot. This one definitely has stopping power in the scroll.
I think this is a nice example of when you just you boil it down to the single clear message and deliver that, how striking that is. You compare that with the Telius ads we were looking at before, with all those words all about the guide, and compared to this, you can just feel what's going to attract your attention more. Again, you've got to care about the problem. I've got to care about sales engagement, but that's fine. I'm targeting people that probably would, and those people then If they care, they'll go for it. But I really like the purity, the simplicity of this.
Yeah, it is
And
really interesting to see that, like, all it has is the words, but it works.
And I don't know where this ad led to, but if it led to the homepage, that's probably a big mistake because there's still a lot that we have to justify in this. So if I get somebody's attention about sales engagement being broken, I would definitely take them to a landing page where you talk about why it's broken. Very, very important because then you're pointing out deficiencies in the status quo.
Yeah, this is just the headline. The ad does the headline of your story. The landing page does the rest of it. One of the things you're going to get with LinkedIn ads is your logo at the top. And so you can be even more pure with your use of space. You don't necessarily have to have your logo.
That's a great point.
Yeah. A lot of the time, you don't kind of notice that because the ad is busy and then the logo kind of gets lost in it. But here, where we've got this real purity, I think that the repetition of the logo looks visually a little odd. So it's a small thing. I don't think it's going to stop people clicking on it, but that's one comment I would make.
This one I thought was great. It kind of harkens back to James's example of the kid with the shirt that's in the soccer picture that's all dingy white. How do you do this in B2B where you're dealing with an emotional component? And this does it pretty well because it's like, hey, how's the new gig? Well, whoever built Salesforce clearly hates me. Like, who can't identify with that? I mean, everybody knows that Salesforce is pretty hard to make changes in. So I really like the problem agreement hitting at, an issue. Like you can clearly feel how frustrated that person is. Somebody's asking them about their new job and they're immediately talking about, well, it's frustrating because of Salesforce.
Yeah, you've made it about them. Okay. So Sweep has been really smart here to hold back on the instinct to want to talk about Sweep. Actually, you want to really talk about what does your buyer care about. This ad does that, gets the emotion of it, and has some fun with it. It doesn't matter whether I've heard about Sweep. What it does is like what I'm clicking on here is my emotion about the problem. That's kind of what makes me click on that link button.
Yeah, it does it in a creative way too, which catches your attention. I think most people are a little nosy. You see a screenshot of a chat, you want to know what the chat was about. So
That's a great point. Yeah, we are intrigued by that.
Yeah. So yeah, this one's very good.
I think that's it. So, of course, if you would like a deeper dive into your advertisements or content on your website, like blogs and white papers, and even the copy itself that's on your homepage, which I see a lot of mistakes out there being made. Like just as an exercise, you can go try this, go look at 3 or 4 software websites and just see if you can tell what they do or what problems they solve just by looking at the hero. And I'll bet you the answer is going to be like one. But anyway, if you'd like a tear down from us that's a little more in depth in terms of our methodology for positioning and messaging and differentiation, just click here or let us know, and we would love to do that for you.
Thanks to those who take the time to send in their ads for us to look at like this. It's a little exposing, we are being critical, but actually it's a learning session and we need input to do it. So thank you very much.
yeah, that vulnerability is what helps you get to that next step. We're grateful. We love doing this. It's awesome every time someone sends in some ads for us to look at, and we want to help genuinely.
And with that, have a great weekend, everybody.